You're listening to the 95 Podcast from the team at 95 Network, where we host conversations specifically designed to support leaders in small and mid-sized churches.
Well, hey, everybody. Welcome back to the 95 Podcast. This is Dale Sellers, Executive Director of 95 Network, with another really cool podcast today. Just the name of the company that Brad works with is cool. Is it Gloo? Is that correct?
It's Gloo, but we spell it weird, Dale. It's Gloo. That's right.
Okay, all right. Well, you're Brad Hill. Brad, glad to have you on today.
Great to be here, Dale. Excited to talk to you and help some of these pastors and church leaders out.
Well, we need all the help we can get. Take a few moments, if you would, and just kind of give us your story, and we'll kind of dive into the topic in a minute, but just help everybody get to know you a little bit.
Sure. Well, Gloo is an organization. The way we short describe it, we are the technology platform connecting the faith ecosystem. That's a big load of words, but
I like that. Yeah.
There's this weird niche, Dale, that I've kind of found myself in, or God's put me in most of my career, which is helping churches in various ways understand, how do we grapple with technology? What are the tools we can use appropriately? And that goes for big, medium, small, church plant, everybody up and down. So, my background dates to pre-internet, and then really helping churches figure out whether they should have websites, and then should we get away from floppy disk, CD-ROM, and think about software in the cloud and all these things. So, you and I have both seen a lot of seasons of this.
Mm-hmm.
And I would just say we're sitting here at a moment where we've never had access to tools more cheaply, more powerful, and I think more potential for us to expand our gospel mission. But it's not without, concern and consideration. So we got to think about this stuff well, but be excited, even if you're not techie, right? Because there's a lot of great tools that God has allowed to come into play, and that's a passion area for me. So I've just found a lot of different ways through the years to connect all that with the work of the church.
That's so cool. So tell us about your family.
I'm married to Wendy, and we've got two beautiful teenage daughters. One's going to be graduating high school this year, and she's heading to college, and the other one's a year behind her. And we live in Knoxville, Tennessee. I've actually lived in all 4 time zones in the continental U.S.
Oh, cool.
So we've bounced around. Probably can relate to something just about everybody listening can say from wherever they're from.
So let me ask you this before we get into this. As a father of 2 daughters, have you heard the song Butterfly Kisses?
So you're meddling, because when our
I
church,
have 3 daughters.
Oh yeah, Bob Carlisle. Well, when our church, and they're a little grown out of this now, but when we had the daddy daughter dance,
yes,
and there's 2 songs that would just destroy all the dads. It was that one, and then Cinderella by Stephen Curtis Chapman.
Oh, absolutely, man.
All the dads got like a lot of allergies suddenly.
So when I was pastoring our small church, I don't think I've mentioned this on the podcast. When I was pastoring our small church, one Sunday I built a service around that song, and I had my 3 daughters come out and act out the 3 different things. They're all little kids. And when my oldest daughter, she was probably 12, when she came out in my mother's wedding dress, she'll change her name today. The whole church is just not crying.
That's just me.
It was impactful. But the reason I asked you that was because when my youngest graduated Clemson, and I actually went to help her move. This was the dumbest thing I've ever done in my life. I was helping her move back home for a while. I listened to that song as I was carrying her stuff back to our house, and I pulled over the side of the road because I couldn't see. So I had to ask, the dad of daughters, I figured that maybe you do that song pretty well.
Being a girl dad, be proud of that. And we got a soft spot. We don't show it much, but we do.
I wouldn't change anything. I had 3 wonderful daughters, and they're all doing very well. And a couple of them are working in ministry, but they've just been. It's been a joy of my life to raising them, and they understand the value of technology. But our audience typically comes kicking and screaming into anything new. I'll describe it that way. We've been at 95 Network. I've been leading here for 8 years, and we have constantly talked about this topic and tried to broach this topic. As I mentioned to you off camera there, that a lot of churches, we ask them, how are you doing technology? And they say, well, oh, we're on Facebook Live, or we're live streaming our service. There's so much more available to us. And so I'm hoping you're going to be able to help us today to see, one, what's available, and then two, how to use that. So what would be the first step you think we need to discuss today as far as getting churches to embrace technology?
Well, I love that question. And I think, maybe surprisingly, I would actually steer us first to start in the heart and in our minds a little bit. You nailed it. I've done a fair bit of research on this, Dale. The church has had a complicated relationship with technology.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm talking about going back to printing press,
Yes.
even.
Yes.
I found some Benedictine monks who, right after Gutenberg had the first few pages roll off this printing press and word started to spread, these monks absolutely were beside themselves and decried this invention as the work of Satan. Because in their words, everyone knows that the scriptures should only be handled by trained, men of God,
Mm-hmm.
not for the unwashed masses, so to speak.
Yeah.
And you saw similar patterns as we moved through, broadcast television, radio, internet. I mean, can you imagine if the church had just sat out and still was objecting to the internet? What a gospel opportunity we would have and would be missing.
Mm-hmm.
But it's understandable, because when something new happens, it's change.
Yep.
And also, we would say here at Gloo, we often talk about the technology itself is not good or bad. We would say it's amoral.
Mm-hmm.
However, that does mean it can be used in a lot of ways. And human nature, we often see these things first get in the hands of folks that are trying to make a dollar, or they're trying to do something nefarious, kind of bad guys, if you will.
Yeah.
But that does not mean that the good guys, those that are carrying the gospel truth, also should not be using these tools, because, God is never surprised by some new piece of technology or new tool. So
Yeah.
I think starting in the heart, we need to be curious. I might repeat that today, but, I just implore pastors and leaders to not sit out or not cross your arms and say that's all rubbish, but be curious about it, but also be thoughtful about it and think about, how can we use these things redemptively for good?
Mm-hmm.
Because if it helps us reach one more, if it helps us engage a little better, grow our church, whatever, then maybe that's worth looking at.
Let me ask you this, because I think we've kind of seen a similar path as far as ministry and church and stuff. The church, I think, really embraced television, and you had the Billy Graham Crusades, and you had the TV teachers and the Christian stations. But obviously, churches embraced radio, especially Christian radio. It seems to me there was just a lot stronger resistance to the online internet. There was a lot more skepticism than it was to the other things. Did you see that, or am I just kind of just off base there?
Oh yeah, well, I think what's underneath that, Dale, is, as this technology in the cloud and internet and now AI, all of this is advancing. First of all, it feels so fast.
Yes.
And it used to be these advances happened once in a generation, or maybe once or twice in a century. Now it seems like every month.
Yep.
There's some massive new thing, and that's very difficult to keep up with. But I'd also say that, the latest technology trends we've been talking about in these last few years, going back even to internet, these are things that more directly connect all of us. Mm-hmm. It's, TV, radio is by definition broadcast. There is a broadcaster, sending something out to an audience. It's sort of a producer consumer exchange. Mm-hmm. Now we have more of a connection where the playing field is level, and all of us can produce and consume, whether we've been seminary trained or not.
Yep.
Also, you can access a more powerful set of technology in your iPhone than the astronauts had when they went to the moon, and that opens up an immense amount of power that's now accessible to somebody with no budget. And when Billy Graham was around, it was scarcity, right? Because
Yes.
you had to have satellites and antennas and all that stuff. So I think all those factors combined, yes, they do mean that it's a different dynamic than maybe what we had in those. But the core principle I think is still there, and that is Christians probably fall on the spectrum. When something new comes around, there's those that are like, nope, it's bad, I dismiss it.
Yep.
On the opposite end of the spectrum, there's those that are like shiny object syndrome. I want everything new, be the first on the block.
Yep.
And I think it's wise for us to figure out where in the middle of that spectrum we could fall, because there's wisdom on both ends, but they are extremes.
Yeah. We did a conference, and I want to give you this statement so you can think about it as you share with us today. And I shared it recently as we did a different podcast. But we were doing a conference once, and I had a pastor tell me this. He says, "When I don't understand something, I just avoid it."
Right.
And that's not to sound ignorant, but part of what drives that is, especially the small church pastor, they're already so overwhelmed with their schedule and all they have to get done, and really not having a big team. I think maybe that's one of the reasons why there hasn't been more of a embracing of technology, is just, okay, I've got to spend some time learning how to do this, and then I just don't have capacity to do it. And so it just kind of goes by. Have you noticed that yourself?
Absolutely. And I mean, I could not agree more. God bless our pastors and leaders who are shouldering so much and have that whirlwind going on. But, that gentleman who said, if I don't understand it, I avoid it. Maybe we can be charitable and say God's given him the gift of discernment or something. There's a concept that actually comes out of the business world, Dale, called it's called the diffusion of innovation. It's sort of a curve. If you can picture a line graph, and it starts, the curve is very low, and then it has a big rise, kind of a bell curve shape, and then back down.
Mm-hmm.
And there are phases of that. And what that's describing is someone's attitude toward something innovative. And on the front end, we've all heard these terms. On the front end, you have early adopters.
Mm-hmm.
These are people that, do want to try things new and are willing to take risks, and et cetera. And then you have maybe the early majority as the curve starts to grow. These are the folks that maybe want to be second or third on the block, but not first, but not
Mm-hmm.
last. The late majority wants to make sure everything's safe. They don't want to take any risks. Let somebody else fix the bugs, and then I'll go. But then you have the laggards at the far end, and that sounds like maybe the gentleman you're describing.
Mm-hmm.
Laggards basically are just fine with the way it was 100 years ago. Thank you very much. I don't need anything new. They will come around eventually, and all of that is okay. Like, God has created in all of us, I think, sort of a disposition toward one area of that curve. And I don't want to overgeneralize that all small church leaders are late majority laggards.
Mm-hmm.
I think that God's probably placed, a little bit of both in every part of that curve.
Yeah.
But it is true. I mean, we are carrying a timeless message that does not change.
Yeah.
And so we're called to protect that, steward that. And yet we gotta live in a culture that's like going as fast a mile a minute. And so how do we reconcile that with all the whirlwind you described? That's a tough task for a leader.
Well, I think I've seen pastors in all those categories, but I think, and I almost hear a pastor saying this right now, it's not me that's, you call them laggards. It's not
Right.
me, it's my congregation, which makes it a little bit more difficult. Because in a small church, sometimes, there's this power struggle, I guess is the way to say it, between trying to take people forward and everybody being very comfortable with where they are. Have you seen that as well?
Well, yes, and you're absolutely right. The pastor is, and a lot of pastors, I think the most effective ones have such a personal connection. They know their flock, they know their people, and that's very wise. We see that how Jesus walked. We see Paul was always a student of the audience, so to speak. But we've been doing some research lately, Dale. Gloo together with the Barna group.
Okay.
And one recent thing that was quite interesting, we went out to a large subsection of practicing Christians across a lot of different sizes of church and
Mm-hmm.
a lot of all the generations. And really the core question was, how comfortable are you, and do you see a potential for your church to use technology in certain areas? And might surprise some, but the overwhelming answer was yes. We see potential for our church to use technology. These are areas like online giving, having training and small group curriculum and other resources digitally, maybe using social media. Even, a little bit surprising, but the idea of virtual counseling or support services. If I don't have time to drive in and meet with somebody one-on-one, would you be okay doing a video call, a FaceTime call?
Mm-hmm.
In all those categories, close to two-thirds, if not three-quarters of practicing Christians said yes to that. So even, the old idea, like our older folks are the ones that are the slowest, that can be true. But we're seeing, as the years go on, definitely a thawing toward maybe even more of an excitement to see how could my church, my pastor benefit from this. So to the pastors, I would say, don't count out your congregation. If you're avoiding technology for their sake, you might be surprised at their level of comfort. Again, you got to do it thoughtfully though, because they'll call you on it if you start getting a little crazy.
So when I grew up, the cassette tape was the jam. Okay, so we had this thing happen to where you could record the Sunday service and then order the cassette tape of that service, and next Sunday pick it up. And I think they charged us $3. Then all of a sudden, the duplicator came out, and you could actually hang around at the sound booth, and 5 minutes after the service, you could get a copy of the service to that day. Everybody loved that. They embraced that. And then the compact disc came along, and then the video camera. And for me, I just go, if we could change our mindset, what a wonderful way to help shut-ins. What a wonderful way to help our older congregation to use things like Zoom or live streaming or things like that. So it seems to me like, man, if we could just tweak a little bit our understanding, we've always embraced technology, and now we have some of the best there is available. It's kind of hard for me to understand why we wouldn't take advantage of that.
I remember working the tape ministry. Oh yeah, those duplicators, we had arrived. That's right.
Yes, sir.
Well, and with all these things, you're exactly right. All that's technology, Dale. And how we use it and what it's for. I just keep coming back to this idea that these are tools, and you think about those cassette tapes. I remember them well. I remember those little clear plastic cases you'd flip open, and
Yep.
somebody had printed out those Avery labels to slap on the tapes and all that.
Yes.
But who's the tape for? Who's that cassette tape for? It might be for us to take it home and listen to it again and enjoy that sermon or put it on a shelf. But what about, could you use that to hand to a neighbor? Could you use it to encourage a coworker? Right. And so I think that when we're more clear on the purpose, hey, in our church, we are radically passionate about reaching the lost, and we want to use every tool available to share. That cassette tape now is a piece of content I could put in someone's hands who isn't ready to come to church, but they might listen to it in the privacy of their car or home. And now, of course, we have so many more ways to do that. But all of those tools, all those systems just need to exist within reminding ourselves of what the real goal is. If we think like consumers and we want to do what's comfortable for us, we're probably going to land or stick in a spot. But when we realize and kind of lift our eyes a little bit to that horizon, the generation and the community around us, every other part of their life, they are engaging, they are consuming, they are interacting now with digital tools. Could be Facebook, like you said, could be, I mean, I'll say the word TikTok. I mean, I know that just makes people cringe sometimes, but let me tell you, we talked about our daughters, Dale. I mean, my, teenagers are there.
Yep.
Good, bad, indifferent. And so who I don't see there enough is the church. And so, we have an opportunity to just look at this and say, if we had to get a little uncomfortable to reach those folks, would we do it?
When I was a kid and growing up in high school, they would tell us, and I share this a lot because I want this to be ingrained in our listeners, that about 90% of all the people who gave their life to Jesus did it before their 18th birthday. all research today continues to bear out that the majority, up to 95, sometimes I see 98% of people who make a commitment to become a Christian, that do it before they turn 20. So isn't it just totally important for us as leaders to embrace using technology, because isn't that where all the young people are?
That's right. It's sort of like understanding the language if you're a missionary.
Mhm.
And we had a good analogy during COVID because I know that as our buildings shut down and we were all hoping and praying that was temporary, we had to, in many cases, a lot of us had to quickly figure out this thing called live streaming
Hmm.
that we hadn't done. And so we got a camera, we might maybe found a teenager to help us set things up, all that.
Hmm.
But there was sort of this idea in the back of our minds that once this is all done, we're going to go back.
Yes.
And that was sort of like taking a short-term mission trip. If you're going to
Yes.
spend a week in a foreign land,
That's a good
you might get
example.
a guidebook and learn a couple key phrases in the language, but you've got the comfort to know that, well, we're going to come back home. Um, Now we realize that the pandemic and honestly just technology is representing honestly a cultural shift. It's not a
Hmm.
technology shift, and we are field missionaries.
Hmm.
This is not temporary. We are not going back. It's incumbent on us, just like it was for Paul, who learned about the unknown God in Athens, or any other trained missionary that decides that God's calling them to a foreign place. Many of us feel like this technology today is a foreign environment and it's uncomfortable. And yet, if we feel called to reach and engage the people there, we're going to do what's needed to learn it. And so again, that comes back to what's our goal. And a lot of times God has a interesting way of just pushing us outside our comfort zones. But more than that, I would say that Christians, and especially now, I mean, the latest big advance, of course, is AI.
Yeah.
Um, the church normally has a reputation for lagging behind,
Yes.
being 10 or so years behind the curve on things. We're encouraged, I would say this time, that there's a lot of very thoughtful, very biblical, but very innovative thinking happening in corners of the church right now to say, how could we use AI for the kingdom? And so Christians actually have an opportunity to not just catch up, but in many cases lead
Mm.
here. And so that's a change, and that's exciting for us. I'm not suggesting, by the way, that you need to run out tomorrow and get some AI robot in your church or what have you. Although I would suggest you're probably using it more than you realize already.
Hmm.
So yeah, I think, it may feel uncomfortable, but we have absolutely seen time and again where when folks adopt that mindset of, I'm going to do everything I need to do to engage this culture around us, because they do live online, then we're going to be much more effective that way.
We're going to take a short break, and we get back. I want to share something with you and get your response to this. So, short break. We'll be right back with Brad. Back here with Brad Hill, talking all things technology in the church. And here's what I wanted to throw at you there, Brad. So, because we work with lots of churches, when the pandemic happened, if you remember, we were learning about it. We're in February, and all of a sudden, everybody's making plans on what they're going to do for Easter. Easter was coming up, and I think in either late March or early April that year, and then they asked us not to meet in person. And I saw something that I haven't seen since, and really hadn't seen before. But I saw the most innovative things happening with churches of all sizes. I remember one church, Brad, they put a jumbotron. They took four large screen TVs on a forklift, made a frame for them, and created a jumbotron so their people could come sit in the parking lot and watch the service in their car. And once they started meeting in person, they kept doing that because so many people liked it. Every FM transmitter in America was bought so churches could broadcast to the parking lot. And the reason I bring that up. There was, because of the urgency of the moment, there was an openness to do whatever we have to do to connect with people. Uh, do you see maybe that urgency maybe coming up under the surface now, because the baby boomers are aging out, and the next generations are looking for something authentic? I feel like we're maybe in a moment now to where maybe we can lead, as you said, with AI. Have you seen anything like that?
Well, yeah, no, I've got memories of a lot of those similar stories, and maybe the way I'll answer this, I'll talk to that pastor who's like, I don't have a forklift, I can't afford a
Yeah,
jumbotron.
yeah, yeah.
Um, the churches that we saw that really continued to thrive the most during the pandemic, and yes, there were some that did just incredibly creative things,
Yeah.
with, methods, programs, technology, whatever. But it was the churches that had personal connection as part of their DNA.
Hmm.
It was the churches that had relationship. And this, by the way, we saw so many small to mid-sized congregations that had already been running that way for years.
Hmm.
So therefore, they had the ability to check in on everyone. They had the ability to continue to communicate with their congregants, even outside of Sunday morning. Here's another really encouraging thing, Dale, that we've picked up just recently in some of our research, again with Barna. We looked at Gen Z,
Okay.
and we talked to them about kind of the value of technology, but also digital connections technology.
Hmm.
And almost 60% of Gen Z, first of all, this will just warm everyone's heart. They agree that their generation spends too much time online. Okay. So you all called it. Everybody who's the grandmas and grandpas out there, yes,
Yeah.
they agree too. We are online too much,
Hmm.
and a third of them wish they spent less time online. But this is the most encouraging part. 70% said they strongly agree that in-person relationships are more valuable than digital. Now, it does not mean that they're going to necessarily walk away from everything they're doing, but we have to understand that this generation that's coming up, which others have described as digital natives, they grew up with this stuff. They never didn't know anything with
Yep.
screens.
They've
It
had
was
the whole
always
time, whole life. Hmm.
for them. It is possible to have relationship online. That's
Hmm.
foreign to a lot of us.
Yes.
I like to meddle with churches sometimes. I'll say, do you think if you pray with someone over text, does it count? And that's a little bit of a provocative question, but for our kids and kids to come, praying over text or having a quick discipleship check-in over FaceTime or Snapchat is every bit as natural as maybe sitting down for coffee. However, they are agreeing that there is something special about that kind of, in-person connection. They would just say that it's very fluid.
Yes.
So for us, I think we need to think about how do we use everything from jumbotrons to TikTok to live streaming to say we want to form relationship. We want to invite you to come in person. We're not going to make you feel guilty if you're on a screen, and understand that it's going to ebb and flow back and forth. That's very foreign to a lot of us, but
Yes.
for Gen Z and younger, that's how they interact with every other friend they've got. So I think as a church, we can learn from that.
Brad, there are churches, and you well know this, there are churches that have online pastors. They have the complete services virtual, everything, the worship, the preaching, everything, and which that is so foreign to, I'm 62 years old, so that's foreign to me, but I can't discount it if it's reaching people who may never come. And that's one of the things when I get pushback as I work with churches, well, it's always better to meet in person. Well, I mean, no one's arguing with that. But what I tell churches is our focus needs to be both and instead of either or. There should be
That's right.
some approach to doing to using technology to help you. Obviously, it's better when you can sit down with somebody, but don't just throw them away because they're not in person.
Well, and I think there's a step further on this, Dale. And I think that we talk a lot about should we use it. We need to just recognize and accept that our kids, our young adults right now are in it. They're living in this digital landscape, Monday through Friday, Saturday, Sunday, every day of the week they're there.
Hmm.
Um, when my kids got their driver's license and got behind the wheel, we did not let them drive until they had been properly trained and
Hmm.
tested and accepted that they understood the principles. And even then, I was a little scared
Hmm.
to see them running out on the road. We're putting smartphones, we're putting social media in the hands of younger people which is far more powerful and yes, could have far more danger. Isn't it incumbent on us as believers to train them and to give them discernment because they're going to be encountering most of the concerning stuff when we're not around.
Yes.
And so this is we can sit back and say I dismiss it, I avoid it, but to me that's a very unwise position because as we train up this next generation, teaching principles like number one, being in the Word and knowing biblical truth, because now that we're in this age of AI, it's getting harder and harder to spot the fake.
The way it is, that's true.
Whether it's a picture, a video, an article, right? And if all of us, by the way, understand what real truth sounds like, we're going to be far more equipped to understand when something feels just 2 degrees off.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing when we put them on social media, let me just go right at this. Like the way we behave as believers in the comments thread
Mm-hmm.
on an Instagram post or Facebook is every bit a part of our witness as when we're on a street corner talking about the gospel.
Yep.
And so we've got actually an incredible opportunity to train and teach how to live in, how to operate, and how to be a witness in the midst of a digital landscape. I think the sooner we realize that digital online is really more of a place, it's more of an environment than it is a tool. And that's different thinking for a lot of us because we pick up a phone for a purpose, we put it down, but not our kids. Our kids live there.
Yeah.
And they need to understand how to be good, kingdom citizens and operate well in that environment. In doing that, we can not only protect them, but I think we can actually equip them to be salt and light.
It's just normal to them. You and I were talking before we began to record. You live in Knoxville, Tennessee. I'm in Greenville, South Carolina, so we have a lot of the same weather systems. You just happen to be on the other side of the mountains, and there's a chance for there's going to be a snowstorm. They're talking about next week. Well, what happens now if there is a snowstorm, ice storm? Our schools here just shift and go, okay, today will be e-learning day. Whereas when I went to school, you had to make up snow days, So it's flipping a switch now. It's part of their DNA. It's part of their lifestyle. So here's where I want to go as we move to the latter quarter of the podcast. You're talking to pastors right now they know we could do a much better job at embracing technology, but we don't even know where to begin. Where would you start?
Yes. So, the principle that we start on with any tools, and I'll happily give a couple recommendations that I think are great places.
Okay.
You want to be focusing on tools and technologies that support relationships. That you are in the relationship business. If you're a pastor, if you're a leader, small group coach, any type of role, you want to be looking for tools that support the relationship. Maybe a little more skeptical of tools that replace the relationship.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that's just a principle to start with. But I would say that couple things at Gloo. One thing we've noticed is communication is such a key component of ministry. We do it every Sunday morning, of course, but through the week we send emails, we may send out notes, what have you. What we're learning is that email, which has been honestly a pretty reliable, pretty common mode of communication, is dying.
It's not anymore.
No one's reading your Thursday newsletters that you send out.
They aren't.
Well, there's a couple who are, but most, and then you're gonna sit there and scratch your head. How come nobody knew about the prayer meeting? How come we didn't get folks to the worship night? And you were just talking about Easter, Dale. Like, how come nobody invited? It's because they didn't read your emails.
Well, if I can interject here, I moved away from doing a lot of written blogs. Now, I've got a friend like Carl Vader's. People love to read his stuff, but I was spending hours writing blogs, and I'm looking at the results, and people aren't reading them. So I just shifted more to focusing on our podcast for that very reason. That's
right. Yeah, this is a great medium. Now, the good news is that texting, which nearly all of us are pretty familiar with, has been sort of this sleeper hit, and where email is maybe on the decline, texting is absolutely effective, engaging, does not require an app. You can even do it on a flip phone if you're patient enough. So one thing we're doing at Gloo is we are putting texting service in the hands of any church who would want it. It's freely available. And we have now, Dale, about 90,000 churches connecting to the Gloo platform.
That's awesome. That's
The
awesome.
number
If I
one
was
thing they're
pastoring
finding,
today, brother, I would do mass text. That's how I would communicate because
no
it's just
doubt.
what people are used to.
And there are some great time-saving tools in there. You talk about your busy pastors,
Hmm.
whether it's helping a new visitor or a would-be plan their visit, or someone who has visited, do a
Hmm.
follow-up and come back a second time.
Hmm.
We by the way are seeing prayer. I kind of joked earlier about praying over text.
Hmm.
Churches have adopted texting as an additional part of their prayer ministry. We routinely see churches increasing overall prayer activity by as much as 10x, because it's available. It's there every time of the day, every day of the week. So my
Just
first
because of
recommendation,
texting.
prayer, yeah, it could be one-on-one.
Uh-huh.
It could be, text out to the group. And let me be
Wow.
clear, when we talk about this, what I'm not talking about is, hey, pastor, you got to start using your personal phone to text the
Yes,
church.
yes, yes, yes.
That's not what we're
Absolutely.
saying.
No, not at all.
This is a built-in service that you can use from your laptop, or your staff can join in,
Hmm.
and it integrates with the church database that you probably already use, things like Planning Center, CCB, Fellowship
Hmm.
One. We integrate with those things. And so it provides you a new communication mechanism, but it's also one-on-one. So you kind of get the best of both. And there's some additional things you can do. There's a small paid option when churches want to go deeper. It's called Glue Plus. And that's been extremely effective too. One other category I would just commend is, we talked about AI,
Hmm.
and that's such a big topic. But to break it down very practical, you're seeing right now a number of companies and ministries coming forward with tools built around AI, but they're really designed for the church. And they're done in a very biblical, very values aligned way. And that's something that we're really accelerating here at Glue. But one partnership we have is a company called Church.tech,
Okay.
and they provide some great tools. You can take your sermon after you preach it on Sunday,
Hmm.
and Church.tech's tools can automatically create discussion group questions. They could help you create kids curriculum. They could help you look at that sermon and get clips if you want to post it out on your Facebook page.
Hmm.
You might have a volunteer or a person helping you do some of those things today. It might take a day or two a week. This gets it down to 30 minutes,
Wow.
and it lets you review everything, right? So you're still in the driver's seat. But that tool, another one that we have called Faith Assistant, are all using some of this brand new generative content technology to dramatically save time and also help you reach more. So those are just a couple different categories, and we can provide those links for folks who may want to check that out.
Okay. So you guys are all about helping churches in any arena where they are, whether they're starting out or growing it or whatever. Is that correct?
Yes, I mean, with 90,000, at that point we're well beyond mega church, whatever. I would actually say the vast majority of the churches we're serving are 125 members or less.
Okay.
And we are building and looking for tools with those leaders in mind. When we say things like save time,
Hmm.
get back to ministry, we know that that's such on the minds of leaders, especially without a lot of paid staff. We have a marketplace on Glue. It's a place where you can go discover a lot of free tools and free content
Hmm.
to help you with a lot of the jobs that you probably are dealing with, and maybe discover some ministries and great programs out there that you didn't know about because you don't have time to go just scour the internet. So that's another thing that we're trying to do progressively on Glue, is be a place where you can discover the things that are going to help you grow the most, whether you're a church of 90 or 9,000.
So if I sign up with you guys, am I like connecting to a person who first of all, they just want to know who we are and what we're about? Because what I hear you saying is not like one size fits all. You customize what you're doing.
There's a lot to take in, yeah, and so you can go to Glue, and again it's Gloo, but you can
Yeah.
go to glue.com.
I have your website in the show notes too.
That's great. Yeah. And so you can sign up there, no problem. But yes, our team will reach out. Our goal is to have a quick 15-minute conversation with every church that signs up to at least get things started.
Mm-hmm.
One large additional thing I'll just mention, Dale, that I would love every church, small, mid, big, everybody in between.
Mm-hmm.
This year, we are advancing an initiative called the State of the Church.
Okay.
There's a lot of the research we talked about today comes from this. The question I get the most from pastors is, "Thank you for sharing all that data about Gen Z and AI and generational trends. I just need to know how that applies to my church.
Yep.
What about my people? I'm rural, I'm multicultural, whatever my context might be." So we have a component called the State of Your Church. And this is a chance for you to actually get a pulse on your people, the health of the people. Are we making disciples? And is our church as a whole moving in the right direction?
Mm-hmm.
The core part of this is an assessment. It's free, that every church can use. We've already had about 30,000 churches over the last couple of years take advantage of parts of this. We would commend that to every church, because what you're going to get at the other end of this is a simple dashboard screen that literally lights up and shows you the health of your people. And I always say, if you knew exactly how the people in your church were doing, how would that change things like your preaching,
That's so good.
your programs, your budget, your staff? And so the State of Your Church is a tremendous resource. I could not recommend it more highly. Again, no cost to use it. We've got a whole kit to help you figure out how to roll this out. What do I say? Maybe my folks are skeptical about a survey. We've got you. Like, we've talked through all of that.
Is that a link? I mean, can we put that in the show notes? So if someone's listening right now, they can click right on it and
Yeah, you would just go to stateofthechurch.com.
Okay.
That's the website.
Okay.
That's right.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'll include that as well. So here's what I want you to do. I want you to think about the pastor who's listening right now. At the back of their mind and deep in their heart, they know, man, I need to update, I need to embrace, I need to go in this direction. But especially even AI, there's just so much I don't understand. Well, you guys are sitting down having coffee. What would you tell them to be like the next steps?
Well, I think it can be so intimidating. You're exactly right. And just, we get this, they say paralysis by analysis. I don't
Mhm.
understand it, so I'm not going to do anything.
Yep.
My first, going all the way back to how we started, Dale, I would just encourage us to be curious, have that kind of missional mindset, if you will, about technology. In your own life, think about if you haven't played with tools like ChatGPT. I know that's out there a lot. Take it for a spin personally, no risk, low risk, try it out. You might be encouraged, but we talked about Gloo earlier. One of our jobs at Gloo is to connect every leader to the right next thing. And so the more that you kind of get in there, test it out, try it out, explore, you're going to find maybe one thing to start with. It could be doing that State of the Church assessment that we looked at. It could be trying out texting. We also host a number of events, a lot of free webinars where we're just exploring facets of this. And we've got most of them are not from us, by the way. We aggregate a lot of the best thinkers, pastors just like you, who would say, I was there too, but what I found was, and that can be a great encouragement. We have a text right now with thousands and thousands of pastors. It's called the Gloo feed. And our job on the Gloo feed is to just find encouraging or interesting things that we feel like leaders need to know about. And we don't spam you. We try to send out maybe a text a week, something like that. And so and we can link that too, Dale. But hey, if you don't want to sign up for anything yet, you don't want to do anything yet, you just want to kind of sit back passively, that I would say get on the Gloo feed, because we'll feed you. And every once in a while you might see something and say, well, I'll try that out, or I'll look at that.
Yeah.
That's a great way to start.
I wish I had found you a long time ago, because today's been a breath of fresh air, because I want so much for our churches to be effective. As the baby boomers are dying out, they've been our givers, they've been our servers, they've been our attenders, but they also, according to Barna, have become the done generation too. And but the generations that are coming up, they are looking for authenticity. They are looking for relationships. They are looking for grandpas and grandmas, because with all the technology they have, they're so isolated. And so this is a great way and a great resource for people to connect uh, with, especially the next gen. Man, I really appreciate what you guys are doing. Is there anything else we need to know before we wrap up the podcast based on what we've talked about today? Did we leave anything out?
We'll provide those links. I think those are great places to start.
Okay.
I would just close by encouragement. I think we have a core belief here at Gloo that the church, especially these small pastors, the church is too disconnected today.
Yes.
And our job is in Ephesians 4, it describes the parts of the body, and it closes with this statement that says, "and every connecting ligament." And so that we feel a lot of missional call to ourselves in that statement. And my word to a pastor of a small, medium-sized church is, with technology and with what's happening now, you actually might have an unfair advantage because you've got access to things that you never had access to before. And so we would just encourage you and know that the church is God's plan A and there is no plan B. And we're going to try to equip you to do every bit of gospel work you're called to. So I appreciate the space to have the conversation today.
You have been awesome. It's just been great to know you exist. And like I said, or like you had mentioned too, we're going to put all these links in the show notes, and I hope people will reach out to you, connect with you. Thank you for what you guys do. Thank you for your heart for the church. And thank you that you understand things that we don't understand and you make it simple.
We're trying. Great to be with you, Dale. Thanks.
Thanks for listening to the 95 Podcast. We look forward to sharing another episode with you next week. In the meantime, visit our website at 95network.org. The website is loaded with great resources created for small and mid-sized church leaders. Until next time, have a great week.